Turns out he's a major cinephile.
They don't watch enough movies. It's a very simple formula.
And here we go. Hello there, and welcome to Knick Knack Goes to the Movies. Back after I needed to take a bit of a break, but now we have so much to catch up on. I've been doing so many random movies on streaming services that we don't even have time to talk, like things like Last Night in Soho, which was super, super good, and the latest superhero TV seasons, streaming service seasons of Miss Marvel and The Boys. Those are actually pretty good teasers to the movies I have seen in theaters and we will be talking about right now on this episode. Which, if you're familiar with the show, about kind of what I'm about on here and what we like to talk about, this is that to a T. Let's do a little mixology. 1 part superhero content, 1 part spooky movie content. The latest MCU show may not have made the cut for this episode, but the latest movie, of course, had to. The Thor movies have been one of the more mixed bags of solo outings, but it's also been one of the longest ones for the MCU, with this being his 4th entry, second by director Taika Waititi. We'll see if it will continue the trend of being, par for the course on how these movies go, because the last one, Ragnarok, was pretty gosh darn good, and we can't have too many fun swashbuckling superhero things without sprinkling in some horror things. Look, I told myself that, like Top Gun Maverick, I could wait for a streaming service for The Black Phone, and I nearly did, but a post-work 5:15 showing was calling to me, and I think it was good that I answered, because it was one of the neater, more atmospheric, small-scale scare movies I've seen in a while. Go check it out if you haven't yet. I'm sure it's just about out of theaters. It may already be out of theaters, but still, Ethan Hawke is way more than that horror guy from the first Purge movie, and it should be clear to see why. He too was in the MCU, because who hasn't been after all this time? But I feel like he and, the Moon Knight gods and so many other Marvel Cinematic Universe deities could have been in this Thor movie that was all about the gods, and I think that could have been cool to see a little more of that, especially because we've met a few of them already. So let's kick things off with the catch-up episode to see if lightning can strike twice for Taika, and if it can make you fall in love with the God of Thunder again. As to be expected in the latest style of Marvel cinema things, even the solo outings are packed with cameos and team-ups, which, look, that's one of the reasons that we liked the shows growing up, or I'm sure people who were into comics before me liked the comic books themselves so much. Obviously, Chris Hemsworth, Tessa Thompson, and Taika Waititi are back, kind of the main three. Weird that Taika Waititi's character has become one of the main characters. The Guardians team is involved, minus Zoe Salanda, and with Sean Gunn taking over from Michael Rooker, one of my favorites from the, I'll say MCU, but really it's from The Walking Dead. The new ads are the obvious superhero vets of Christian Bale and Russell Crowe, the latter, who I love outside of most anything he's in. But I have some thoughts on him in this one. I think the most exciting things going into this were the returns of both Jamie Alexander and Natalie Portman, who felt excluded unjustly from the franchise and the MCU since the less than ideal Thor Dark World entry. At least Darcy's character was around in WandaVision, right? Also, while this isn't as important to the plot, the group of actors are back to retell things, just like Olaf in Frozen 2. But now Sam Neill, Matt Damon, and the other Hemsworth, Luke Hemsworth, who's doing his thing in Westworld, are joined by Melissa McCarthy, who is the actor Hela. I loved it the first time around, and while it may not be as good here, still pretty good. Having Matt Damon have lines outside of the play was super fun. Love him in this, and Neil, fresh off his Jurassic World end cap. And there are some little things here too with, like I said, Kat Dennings, who at least she's had a little bit of MCU love outside of this franchise. Eventually we got a little sprinkle of Idris Elba. And spoilers, a post-credit with Brett Goldstein. Still haven't seen Ted Lasso. I hear great things. Soccer guy just came from the Bayern Man City game at Lambeau, rough end, but great to see Bayern first time in person. But we'll get to Ted Lasso. Not really. Hopefully I'll watch it one day on Apple Plus. Nah, I can't justify paying for that streaming service. I pay for a lot of them. Can't justify that one yet. But we will get to Brett Goldstein eventually as we go here. I was real close to reading internet things and believing things and connecting things that I shouldn't have connected and thinking that the Warriors, Stephen Curry, was in this as one of the actors in the beginning, and it is not. It was the actor. That was a close one. Had to bring it up. Had to keep myself accountable. So I don't know if the look of this movie's villain is doing wonders for me. You know me. I only know so much source material stuff. Didn't grow up with the comics. Grew up with the animated shows for the most part for things. More so DC. But, still. I do like that we at least have good villain motivations. I feel like you guys know that when we did the MCU deep dive episodes, the big ones before we started doing solo ones, a big thing for my tiered ranking system was, the villain and their motivations and not being too one-dimensional, because we've definitely had that in superhero movies as a whole, but as well in the MCU, unfortunately. So, big villain guy. Most of the Funko collection is, I guess, villains. So, villain motivations, villain sympathetic nature kind of stuff. They're not just evil for the sake of it, except for Green Goblin because he's great. Willem Dafoe's great. Love him. But you get the gist. In general, I want to have some reason that this guy, this woman, this whoever they are, is bad, right? So, having your faith shattered and losing the last family member and seemingly the last member of your whole civilization, like all in one brief moment, is pretty understandable for anyone's villain origin story. The idea of killing every god seems a bit much, more just killing your gods, but I guess, like I said, the motivations are believable. And when Bale becomes evil, big shadow, sword, gore, I feel like he has that intimidating presence. Did we get to see it as much as I would have liked? No, but it's there in moments. I did actually have an enjoyable watch with all the Guardians parts with Thor existing on their team and all that entailed. I am, of course, excited for the next two Guardians movies. We got a little teaser, not publicly released, but leaked of the Guardians 3 trailer, so I'm excited for that. But that as well as the Christmas special. So there's something fun seeing this as well as Thor existing with them. And of course, seeing how strong he is to be able to topple most of the villain problem groups with ease compared to everyone else he's fighting with. Like I said, it was fun. Also, how about the running through time thing of him growing up and fighting? It always is going to make me think a thing like that of that amazing beginning to X-Men Origins Wolverine, a movie that, let's be honest, as much as I like to nostalgia it's a bad movie. What they did with Deadpool was rough, and Ryan Reynolds, his beginning, fun. The bad middle and end with that character. Thankfully, they made something with his character and the actor portraying him that was better. But this version in this movie didn't really do a whole lot. I like the idea of it, but nothing can topple that X-Men Origins ones. Also, how sucky was that we never got to see more Liev Schreiber in the role of Sabretooth. He was so good in that movie. I have such a weird relationship with X-Men Origins Wolverine because I like some parts and I really hate other parts. It's so hard to grapple with my feelings of that movie. I, of course, in this movie was excited to see Lady Sif. She was in the first two Thors. We kind of never really saw. We saw the Warriors 3 killed off in Ragnarok. We saw Idris Elba killed off in Infinity War, and we just never really saw her or Valkyrie until, we saw Valkyrie in the end, right? But we never, of Endgame, but we never really saw Lady Sif. And she even had a brief stint in the much up and down nature of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well, if people remember that or not, when they were trying to really connect that show to the MCU before they really went off on their own tangent. But, even in this movie, she did not have anything to do outside of losing an arm off camera and just kind of being there. There was a little joke. I can't believe that she continues to get little or no screen time, because I appreciated what she brought to the first. And yes, I even think of her small role in the second Thor movie being good. It just feels like maybe they had too many love interests and she got sidelined and they just didn't really know what to do with her character, but they didn't want to kill her off. So I don't know. Like I said, I wish they still haven't figured out what to do with her, and I don't think that's going to change. But at least they gave her a little something to show that she's not just dead and placed her somewhere in the end of this whole thing. Now, how about seeing Darcy back from WandaVision to show that people, I think, forget how cool and fun and different that was, and maybe the next watch through wouldn't be as exciting because it wasn't the whole everyone watching it together and interested in this mystery, and obviously the lack of an Evan Peters thing. But I still feel pretty good about WandaVision. What a way to kick things off for the Disney Plus MCU shows. And along with her was a cameo to fill out the squad, the Thor group, a little nod to Stellan Skarsgård. But thank goodness they found a way to bring Natalie Portman back. She just became one of those characters we heard about, the inverse of show don't tell, which is never good as a storytelling 101. Kind of like what they were doing with Gwyneth Paltrow until they gave her important camera time back with, she had a good stint in Iron Man 3. They put her back in the first of the Spider-Man / Iron Man movies, and like I said, they just gave her things to do, thankfully, and we never really got that same treatment, weirdly, from Natalie Portman. These Thor movies have always played with blurring the lines between science and magic, and that concept was introduced to us by Jane Foster. And having her, who's, been experiencing both sides of this debate, she was trying to figure out her medical concern with science, but then she decided to turn to magic. I mean, smart and believable, fun character development. And it was nice to see the reason of their breakup between the pages shown instead of, once again, just telling us about it. I felt like this movie had to do some catch up to make sense why Jane was so sidelined, even though that had nothing to do with Taika Waititi and his movies. That was sort of the overall story. It was nice to see her brought back into the fold. Speaking of storytelling, this is where an interesting theory has been going around, and I believe it, where the whole story is somewhat embellished and fantastical, especially when, Thor and Korg are involved, because this notion goes that this is a retelling of events from Korg's perspective, in the same way that Iron Man 3, which I think we believe all is what it is, was at the end of the day just him telling a story to eventually we saw Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner. I kind of buy into, why Korg's perspective is so over the top and embellished. Because, look, this movie is even more outlandish than the last movie. And I think the last movie had a real good balance. This maybe the balance wasn't as good. It was maybe a little too over the top and weird. And I like Taika Waititi. I like his weird stuff. I really like What We Do in the Shadows, the show. I still need to see that movie someday, which is, of course, he's in. Like Jojo Rabbit. I like his style directing, but this was a little iffy at times. Some of the Marvel jokes, and we know what those are, they're a bit much in this movie. I love dark, depressing things. It helps me feel something. But still, there are a few jokes that make me laugh and aren't the whole goat thing. That was not it. The play retelling was fun, though. Not as good as the one from Ragnarok, the third movie, but still the callback jokes were fun. And I especially like when Matt Damon, like they're having a crisis and he's like, what do we need? Like, we need to make a play about this, and we're on it. Those little things really did get me going. Now, once we got to see Thor and Jane reunited and seeing her whole new vibe using the broken Mjolnir that can separate and reconnect at will, super cool to see. Now, am I all about dark and depressing action things? Of course. But the love story here was nice to see too, of course, just like the title of the movie, Love and Thunder. Now, not just like two people loving each other, though, right? That whole fun thing of Frozen, right? There's all the different kinds of love, sisterly love, everything, right? But opening each other back up to the concept of love, the deeper thing, that was probably the best part of the love story for me. And once again, seeing gore in action, super good and scary. What was not good? The number of spider-like creatures in this. Not good for me. The wrong type of scary. We need to get spiders out of our fantasy, sci-fi, I don't like it in Lord of the Rings. I don't like it in Harry Potter. I don't like it in The Mandalorian. I don't like it. I don't like any of the insects in The Mist. And one day I'm going to rewatch that, but still, I don't need all these big ass bugs. Irrational fear will always be I don't want spiders big as houses. We could go on the rant for this for days. I'm going to stop because it might be too scary for me and for you. Didn't need that. Saw those little legged things when he was making those shadow monsters. I was like, absolutely not. I hate what's happening. I hate the direction and vibe that this has gone. Not sure how much I care for the Heimdall son storyline. I think same thing. They're trying to make it kind of quirky and edgy and fun. I don't know if edgy is the right word. It was this weird vibe. Same thing. Didn't like it. Probably because I just love Idris Elba too much and nobody can replace him. Imagine if he could be the next James Bond. That'd be super fun, right? He's got to be in the top 2 or 3, you would think. I still think it could be, Tom Hardy, Henry Cavill. What about Tom Hiddleston after his spy thing in The Night Manager on AMC with Hugh Lowry? Just putting it all out there. Really curious the next direction for James Bond. But beside that, I'm back to this movie. At least the power being in the story, but at least the Heimdall power that exists with his son leads to some fun things with gore and scaring kids. And I wish that wasn't the most menacing thing he did. I wish he did more, better, scarier things and killed more gods. But it's fun seeing him be a menace to society and for Christian Bale to kind of be able to get into it a little bit, the creepier part. Since we don't see him hunting gods and more just see the aftermath for the most part. We only get to see him kill one god, and that's a little bit unfortunate for me. Because at the end of the day, I don't care for the kids' storyline at all. Rescuing kids is one thing, but giving them all the power authority at the end so they can fight shadow monsters, I don't know. That was like a cringier version of it with they all had their things like this is battery acid. And, I like the It movies, both versions of them. But it was kind of cringy here. Not a compliment. I for sure was excited to see, I initially thought Olympus, the home of the Greek gods of Marvel stuff instead of the Norse stuff, seeing how, gods are just aliens and, mere mortals have kind of deified aliens. And it's an interesting concept. We have just Norse, Greek, depending on where they landed and all that other fun stuff. But instead it was just where all the gods live. Look, we put not the Inhumans, the Internals. The Inhumans have been pretty unceremoniously kicked out of the MCU after the rough Inhumans TV show attempt. But thankfully, Helen Wheel's legend Anson Mount was at least back for a little bit in costume, used his powers once in Multiverse of Madness before being obviously killed off in a very unfortunate, embarrassing way. But it was excited to see Anson Mount in there for a little bit, that's for sure. So we've seen many gods and deities in the MCU, and I just wish we had kind of seen more connective tissue to it all. No Khonshu stuff, sadly. I think there was a Black Panther reference. It was so quick and it wasn't really highlighted. Maybe it's something we'll touch on in the new movie. What a trailer. What a trailer for this sequel to Black Panther. But MCU deities exist. We just didn't get a great look at them all. And there's that one cute nonsense thing that I don't remember. It was in there. It was funny, haha, but So, Russell Crowe, love him as an actor, but he was too much of a joke. I get being pompous and overconfident. That was the whole thing with the Illuminati, but I was bummed out with this direction for him because I really like him. They also made him kind of a joke in The Man with the Golden Fist. And is that a good movie with RZA? No, the sequel's even worse, but still, I liked it. I like him as an actor, but I feel like it was too much of a joke. And maybe this is harsh, but if Zeus had actually killed Korg, I think that would have been better for stake building. The fighting was fun, and they could have had some real heart-hitting moments for the Thor story. And honestly, I think that would have been a nice thing, especially with how it ended, with if he had lost Korg and if he had lost Jane, then he really would have had, this character to raise after, and it would have been just him, which I think would have been a little more, right? Little deeper and darker. Instead of letting us off easy and having him just be ahead for the rest of the movie until the end. I am happy they didn't kill off Zeus, even if he does lose his thunderbolt. The hope that something cool could come with him and Hercules, it is a bit similar to the whole Guardians and the Adam Warlock tease that we are waiting on, that we will eventually see a resolution with Will Poulter. As always, a ton of plot threads in the MCU overall, still waiting to be sorted out. I don't know if we're ever going to get the leader. Maybe we'll get a little more with Abomination, but there's a lot of tendrils still out there in the world that need to be sorted out. Now, this movie has some pacing, story length issues overall. Things felt somehow both rushed and dragged out at times. I realize I've kind of been dogging on this movie, and that is not to say I didn't have fun watching this. There were both fun and visual cool parts to this. The initial seemingly big battle between Thor, Jane, Valkyrie, and Gore looked to be super cool. The visuals of the absence of color, minus a few cool weapon accent highlights, and, his Shadow Realm, not the one from Yu-Gi-Oh!, which was, of course, the first thing I thought of, Pot of Greed and all that. But this visual battle was super cool, and I was all about it. I wish this was the final battle. It was cool to see Gore win and all that, but the final battle we got after that was a bit of a disappointment. Look, the emotional stakes of Jane and her health, and the to Thor or not to Thor with it, making her weaker every time she was, Thoring up, Thorbin time, was a good conflict. There were some really good heartfelt drama things mixed into this movie, but the tone shifts sometimes were a bit too jarring. Now, the actual final conflict of weaponizing children, like I said, this was too much for me to get behind, but having Thor do well until he needed Jane to help, she sacrificed herself one more time to save him, the man she loved. That, once again, was really good. The silliness mixed in was just undercutting some cool, deeper character drama stuff in here. I really did think they were going to use the witch to save Jane from her cancer, but now Natalie Portman is given a final swan song. She's most likely done with the MCU. And there was something noble about her sacrifice that, they could not cop out of. Gore died after not doing too much. Saving his daughter was a fine enough wrap-up story for him, I guess. But still, Thor adopting her and having his daughter, I didn't see that coming, nor am I all that stoked for it. I don't know. But the Jane sacrifice ending up in Valhalla with Heimdall, I enjoyed. Maybe this MCU movie was just a bit mid for this Midgardian, but it was fun and fine. I remember just leaving the theater a bit underwhelmed, rushed, and totally mixed up. Also, super curious what the Lena Headey and Peter Dinklage roles would have looked like in this. We know Peter Dinklage would have been reprising his role, but would Lena Headey have been one of the gods, maybe? The more Game of Thrones alums and things that are moderately in that medievalish, albeit, fantastical and magical version, I would have been curious to see. So, to a movie that underwhelmed, to a different movie that I had no expectations for. I genuinely had no interest in going to the theater, and I love this theater, Marcus Theater to be exact, to see The Black Phone. But on a whim, was going through some stuff. I needed a new horror break to feel something, and boy did this hit the spot. It didn't freak me out like The Conjuring 2 or anything like The Nun, but it was, it was just what the doctor ordered. So while Ethan Hawke has some lovely horror roles in The Purge, Daybreakers, and more, I don't think he was a draw by himself to see this. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to go see the latest Ethan Hawke movie. Even if he was the only actor I really knew from this ahead of time, I would have seen it on a streaming service eventually. Just like Last Night in Soho, which, very good, which is available on HBO Max. I at least knew of Jeremy Davies from a untimely canceled TV show, Constantine, which eventually the character of Constantine got moved to Legends of Tomorrow, but Constantine was a pretty fun show, and it was dark, and sadly we never got a season 2 of that, which I would have much rather had in the CW. And, one of the detectives also had a role in the second Hunger Games and The Walking Dead. But let's talk about our two leads. I know nothing about the supposed lead, Mason Thames, but he was good for all he had to put into this type of role at a young age. But we have to talk about the breakout star of this movie, Madeline McGraw. Not only had, so much to work with in the role, they gave her a lot of good stuff, but she killed it being emotional, strong, and also hilarious. I didn't expect to laugh in this movie, but the small theater group of 6 or so people, we all laughed at some of her great lines and moments in here. Cast her in more things as a sassy and strong type role. She was one of the best parts of this movie, and that's saying something because it was a good movie. So if we aren't here exclusively for the actors, let's talk about the movie plot. In short, kids are getting kidnapped and somehow supernatural things happen through a very specific rotary phone. For my younger fans who weren't around during the roaring 70s and the Ice Bowl, unlike me, a rotary phone was a way to make phone calls while playing the equivalent of a rhythm action game, making small circles, but it had to be attached to a wall, and you could not play Pokemon Go on it. Different times. I remember them fondly. So, this movie is a bit of a period piece, a little retro, taking place in the late 70s, like Stranger Things, but less Kate Bush and Metallica. And somehow less kids seem to make it out of this movie as opposed to the 4 seasons we have had of the best mainstream thing Netflix has out there since it became a original content pumping machine. But, you just think they'd kill off more characters in that show. And we'll see how season 5 goes, but they even said, this ain't Game of Thrones. I get it, but you'd think more characters would get killed off, that's for sure. But I speak so highly of Stranger Things, and it being the best thing out there, because it for sure is something that I think is why people are still having Netflix subscription, let's be real. Because the latest thing they put out, TV-wise, is definitely not doing it, and that is a Resident Evil TV adaptation, which I was hoping so much for it, but becoming the kids' storyline, never a good sign. And I say this as someone who's a big CW superhero fan, very CW, and not in the good way, in the bad way. I'll take the Mila Jovovich movies, or more so, I will take the latest movie with Robbie Amell, Hannah John Kamen, and Tom Hopper. That deserves a sequel. Please make that happen way before adding season 2. If you had to pick, take that sequel over this Resident Evil TV show Netflix live actioning. It's bad. It's not good. I love Lance Reddick. I can't wait for him in the next John Wick movie. That trailer for John Wick 4 also dropped recently. But this show was bad. But how funny is it that everyone who has seen this thinks his version of vintage Albert Wesker was just Wesley Snipes and Blade? And that's not a comment as someone who likes even the bad parts of those 3 Blade movies. They're like Matrix with vampires. The special effects is good sometimes? No, but man, those are pretty fun. But enough about zombie and vampire horror film adaptation wish fulfillment. We have a short story adaptation to the big screen to discuss. This movie kicks off with just a creepy vibe, a world community where child kidnapping is a thing people just seemingly live with and accept. Kids are getting in fights that are pretty vivid, and even the scenes of our main family we are following are pretty hardcore. This movie is not for the faint of heart. And there's domestic abuse moments of their drunk dad and our 2 protagonists, and it's a lot. I feel like these kids being kidnapped all continue to somehow have a passing relationship with our lead, Finney. It feels like he just keeps on losing things and people. But maybe I'm overanalyzing this, and it's just a super small town community where everyone is at least aware of each other. The whole thing of my high school was massive compared to others, and it's just tough to fathom. Well, that and the California-style campus of our high school in New Jersey, which we have a bunch of weather and seasons, so that was hard too. What is neat about this movie is there is a real-world, albeit sometimes a bit dated, horror mixed in with some supernatural elements. Now, sometimes some things need a bit of explanation, but not here. We don't need to know why this specific black rotary phone can communicate with certain dead victims of Ethan Hawke. We don't need to know why the woman in this one lineage family can have psychic dreams, both of them, the mother and the daughter, about the past and the present. We don't need to know why only 2 people can hear this phone. These are just things that exist in this world, and neither us nor the characters in the movie can explain why, which I think is probably why I'm more cool with it, because they're just unfathomable to everybody. Even the characters we're watching experience these. This is the world situation they all live in, and the cards they've been dealt, and now they have to deal with it, and in some cases literally survive it. It's crazy how kids being taken is just like accepted part of life in this small town, and law enforcement trying to solve the crime is just local, and not having this seem to be something bigger that needs like federal agents or something. I for sure got, It/Stranger Things, kids in the 80s or such vibes. But I feel like this is kind of just the genre. The big difference is no matter what, Finney always feels alone in the world. He and his sister Gwen had each other, but that was it. Even his cool bully fighting friend Robin only did so much before he was taken too. And the loneliness really hits you in this movie. The isolation of 2 kids, which obviously becomes worse when they're split up and Finney gets taken and Gwen's doing all she can to, use her powers to help and hold on to this notion that he's not dead and she won't be alone with her abusive dad. Gosh, that scene was brutal. Speaking of Gwen, with she told her brother, right? She had this dream before he got taken about black balloons as a hint or a calling card, and he saw it and still got. But not before his friend Robin, of course. But before that, not only does his sister have cool dream vision powers, let's not forget, she can throw down. She literally beamed a kid with a brick in his head, a brick to the dome, for beating up her brother. Gwen was the best character of this movie, taking care of herself and, swearing at all the cops and during her prayers and legit having some semblance of superpowers in this world. Now, while all this stuff is cool, let's not forget how good Ethan Hawke is. He does take a bit to be on camera. While I would never trust a guy like him to help with his groceries, how do kids trust clowns and magicians? And I guess the clowns were also in Drains, another, a red flag, but Hawke was acting his butt off. He was creepy, unpredictable, and scary. This movie may not be gory, but even before Hawke is terrorizing us on camera, this world has a good amount of violence, but his scares in comparison are so much more psychological. Now the big part, the parts of this movie from this point on are either Gwen trying to find her brother using her dream powers. No, it's not like Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Warriors, or anything like that. Gosh, I haven't thought about the Elm Street movies in ages. Not my cup of tea, franchise-wise. I like a lot of oldies horror. Doesn't do it for me. It's not like that at all. No matter what, Hawke has no seemingly powers outside of maybe being able to hear the black phone ring. I don't think he hears anyone talking, but he can hear the phone at least. But the big part of this movie all takes place predominantly in one house, even more so one basement room. And that is where we see Finney and the titular black phone. So what does this black phone do? We could argue one of 2 things. You could say nothing, it's all imagination. It is Hawke being presented with the guilt from his murdered victims, and Finney using it as a psychological coping mechanism to help him eventually, spoiler alert, escape. But I like to think there is something going on with it in a spooky, ghostly spirit kind of way. And for whatever reason, these 2, Finney and Hawke, can hear the phone. So once he has his basement living, Finney is visited by the ghost of, Christmas past, victims past, slowly learning from each of their experiences as his sister learns from her dreams and dream visions to eventually lead the cops to almost the right house across the street to save her brother. While Gwen's dreams almost got them to the right house and such, a lot of this work was done by Finn and all the boys who were taken and killed before him. I wonder if there's some reason why it's all boys, but it is all boys. He learns a lot. He learns a new tip from each and every one of them. Things that they've tried that worked for a bit, and of course eventually not at all because they all died. And every time you see him get more and more comfortable, sometimes just hearing voices, sometimes seeing a new ghostly manifestation of them for a nice jump scare. This movie had a few. But it's great to see his growth. there were some crazy parts of this whole process, from getting him from, scared, weak loner who never wanted to fight, which was teased in the beginning, to eventually having to go hand-to-hand fisticuffs. But, like, this being a game for Ethan Hawke's character, waiting for him upstairs to beat him, like, psychological warfare. This movie had so many just tense moments. But there's a great build-up, and it never feels too long in the tooth. Perfect pacing for a 100 and a bit more, 103-minute movie. But the emotional build and climax moment had to be where Finney was able to communicate with Robin. While we don't know the full extent of their relationship, it was one of the more hopeful ones for Finney of the whole movie, besides that of him and his sister. But seeing Robin communicate, console, and teach him how to fight finally, and combining this with all the things he learned from the previous victims, which some he had a relationship with, some he just heard of. They're also familiar with all these people in the news, obviously. There's something truly amazing watching Finney fight this man, this monster, and absolutely take him out permanently. And having the ghosts haunt their killer before he died feels like something out of the Mike Flanagan Netflix shows. Something that you've heard me take on all three of them on this podcast if you want to refresher or hear my take for those for the first time. There's a fourth one coming out. I'm still on the fence on it from the trailer so far. The Midnight Club, I believe. So we'll see how that goes. And of course, the end, the survivor girl, final girl in the hospital truck moment, the hug between brother and sister at the end was so good. I assumed one final jump scare was coming at the end, because Finney stood in that doorway a long time, but this wasn't that kind of movie, and Hawk was dead, which is fine. I think that is probably better than a cheap scare at the end. And you just know that this abusive dad will have to have learned his lesson. If not, his kids are super strong and grown, and they have seen some stuff, so they will not be taking anything from him anymore. That is for sure. I'm happy they gave the dad, who is a terrible character, like a shred of humanity, for he just never could understand and care for his wife and her. He couldn't handle her dream warrior powers. Not making him that sympathetic, but giving him a shred of humanity, I think, is a good way to word that. And look, even we see Finney have a bit more confidence in school. No one's picking on him. How could they? He's just been through the ringer. He went to war. These kids don't know anything. They're going to get wrecked if they try to mess with him again. And he has some confidence. He's talking to the girl he met in the beginning, pre-abduction, and, he's going to have some trauma to deal with, but it's as happy of an ending as can be for a movie based in a world with child, abduction and murder. All in all, this is a good movie. It's intense. It might not be for everyone. It is a bit small scale, which works for it, but it is very condensed as well, with so much of it happening in just one room. But for sure unique for a recent horror movie, not unlike Nope, which we will talk on soon. But now you're all caught up on some of my July movies, except Elvis, which I'll get to one of these days. But let's look together at these Letterboxd reviews for both a movie I really wanted to see and one that surprised me. We're going to start with The Black Phone, and like I said, I didn't really have a lot of expectations coming in. I kind of probably initially eyeballed this at like a 3-star, but it got up to 3.5. I don't think it would be crazy to even give it 4 stars, but I'm leaving it at 3.5. It was really good. It just was, it was really good character development and really good character exploration. It just was a little small scale, and I'm okay with that, but 3.5 just feels right. Now, Thor: Love and Thunder. I don't know what I wanted. Maybe a little bit like Ragnarok, but I don't even mind the first Thor as much as other people do. The second one I mind. The second one's not good. But it just, the tone was so all over the place. I wish they had done more scare things with Christian Bale. I wish there weren't as many based on kid stories. Natalie Portman, great to see a lot of people back. Jamie Alexander, once again, had nothing to do, which unfortunately is par for her Marvel journey since the terrible Thor: Dark World. And I didn't really like what they did with Russell Crowe. It made him too goofy as Zeus. Pompous and overconfident and kind of a dick is one thing. He was just goofy. And I don't know. Like, when he's doing that post-grade, he's like, when did we become a joke? Like, I don't know. It feels like you've been a joke this whole time. I haven't seen you as not a joke, which stinks. I really like Russell Crowe, and I was curious to see this other side of Marvel deities in a different, region's version of gods, I'm hopeful for Brett Goldstein as Hercules, and, maybe we'll see more Zeus and Russell Crowe, but I'm not getting my hopes up for seeing a whole lot more Zeus, in all honesty. I think they might just say, Hercules and call it a day, which is sad. But I'll throw this movie at a solid 3. It was fine. It was fun enough, but tonally there was a little all over the place for me, which is unfortunate. I have hope. I don't necessarily have as much hope for She-Hulk. I'm hopeful, but I'm not holding out my horses for that. But I am very hopeful for Black Panther's sequel coming out in November. I really like that trailer. Can't wait to see more. So we're all caught up again. Well, almost. I saw Nope yesterday, so we'll get there. Nope will be another episode coming out. But once we got that done, we just got them early August movies to come out. We got Bodies, 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 Bullet Train, and the Hulu movie Prey. So don't even need to go to theaters for that. None of these August ones are like OMG watches preemptively. I'm hopeful and excited that at least one of them will blow me away. I'm leaning towards thinking that's Bullet Train right now for the theater ones. It could also be the one on Hulu, the Predator prequel. I don't know, but hopeful. Nope, I can tell you. Nope is something you should watch, and we'll get in a whole episode on that, but go watch Nope. We'll discuss that episode in detail. I got to do a little more research to fully understand what happened in Nope, but it was good. That's something you should understand to start. So if you want to keep abreast, though, of everything I'm watching, because I'm watching too many things to keep track of them all on this podcast, this bi-weekly one, check out my Letterboxd, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at knickknackmovies or knickknack_IC. So cheers, and as always, until next time, cinephiles.
Are you not entertained? I think this is gonna be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.